Dexter Morgan was never a serial killer by choice. He was programmed. Long before his first kill, before the code, before he even understood what he was, someone was shaping him. Not Harry, not trauma, but Dr. Evelyn Vogel. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't try to stop him. She made him accept it. She called him perfect. Not broken, not dangerous. Perfect. But was she truly helping him? Or was she turning him into something even she couldn't control? Because if Vogel never entered his life, would Dexter have ever become a killer at all? From the moment she was introduced in Dexter's final season, Dr. Vogel made one thing very clear. She wasn't like other therapists. Most psychologists try to help their patients suppress destructive urges. Dr. Vogel, she encouraged them. She believed psychopaths weren't broken. They weren't mistakes of nature. In her eyes, they were necessary. She told Dexter he was perfect, a perfect psychopath. And she didn't say it with fear. She said it with pride. But what does that actually mean? Was she seeing Dexter as a person or as a proof of concept, a living embodiment of her life's work? Because here's the thing, no ethical psychiatrist would ever call a patient perfect for being a psychopath. That wasn't a diagnosis, that was admiration. Which leads to an unsettling thought. If Vogel had met Dexter as an adult, would she have felt the same way? Or was her fascination rooted in the fact that she had been shaping him from the very beginning? Because let's not forget, she worked with Harry. She helped design the very code that defined Dexter's life, and that changes everything. For years, we believed Harry's code was his way of protecting Dexter. But what if that wasn't the case? What if the code wasn't meant to contain Dexter, but to perfect him? To refine him into something more efficient, more disciplined, more functional? If Harry had never met Vogel, would he have raised Dexter differently? Would Dexter have ever become the monster we know today? And that brings us to the real question. If Vogel had more influence over Harry than we realized, then who was truly responsible for creating Dexter Morgan? Was it his father, his trauma, or was it a woman who believed he was never meant to be anything else? Dr. Vogel's work was rooted in behavioral conditioning, the idea that people can be shaped by reinforcement and validation. And if you look closely, she conditioned Dexter the same way someone would train a soldier. Step 1. Identification. She made Dexter believe he was fundamentally different from everyone else, that he could never be normal. Step 2. Acceptance. Instead of fighting his urges, she encouraged him to embrace them as part of who he was. Step 3. Codification. She helped Harry develop the code, making Dexter's killings feel structured, purposeful, and most importantly, justified. The key word here? Justified. That's what made Vogel's influence so dangerous. Because if you convince someone that their actions are not just inevitable, but morally necessary, you erase guilt, you erase doubt, and what you're left with is a killer who doesn't hesitate, who doesn't question, who believes he is doing the right thing. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Vogel never tried to fix Dexter. Not once did she suggest alternative coping mechanisms, therapy, or even the possibility of choice. She didn't tell him that his urges were something he could manage in a non-violent way. Instead, she convinced him that they were hardwired into his being, unchangeable, permanent, something to be honed, not healed. Why? Because if Dexter truly believed he could be something else, if he thought for even a second that his dark passenger wasn't his destiny, he wouldn't have been the perfect case study. Think about it. Vogel built her career on studying psychopaths, but Dexter wasn't just another test subject. He was her masterpiece, a perfectly controlled predator. Was she really trying to help him, or was he simply the proof she needed to validate her life's work? And that brings us to the real question. Did Vogel ever intend for Dexter to be anything else? Or was she, from the very beginning, ensuring that he would always see himself as a killer? If you ask most therapists, they'll tell you their goal is to help their patients grow, to change. But Dr. Vogel? She didn't want Dexter to change. She wanted him to accept what he was. Why? Because Vogel didn't see him as a patient. She saw him as a proof of concept. She spent her career studying psychopaths, trying to understand what made them tick. But unlike other doctors, she didn't just observe them, she tried to refine them. She believed that psychopaths weren't inherently broken or dangerous. To her, they were simply misunderstood products of evolution. And with the right structure, they could be turned into something useful, something controllable. And Dexter? He was her success story. Unlike the impulsive, reckless serial killers she had studied before, Dexter was structured, disciplined, and methodical. He didn't kill out of rage or desperation. He followed a system, one carefully designed to keep his urges from spiraling into chaos. He was the embodiment of Vogel's entire philosophy, a predator that could exist within society, functioning under a carefully crafted set of rules. To her, That wasn't horrifying. That was fascinating. And that's why she never encouraged Dexter to seek real help. She never offered him therapy, never suggested that he try to fight his compulsions, because in her eyes, he wasn't sick. He was perfect, a living example of everything she had theorized about psychopathy and control. But that raises a chilling question. If Vogel truly believed in her work, if she really thought she had mastered the ability to guide and refine psychopaths, why did her own life end the way it did? What did she fail to see? What did she get so horribly, fatally wrong? Dr. Vogel believed that psychopaths weren't just manageable. They were necessary. She saw them as nature's response to a world filled with emotional weakness and moral hesitation. To her, the problem wasn't their lack of empathy, but society's failure to integrate them properly. If they could be guided, if their instincts could be molded rather than suppressed, they could function, even thrive. She thought she had cracked the code, but in the end, her greatest theory became her greatest mistake. The same principles she applied to Dexter, reinforcing his identity as a psychopath, giving him a structure, convincing him his urges were a natural part of who he was, were the same principles that led to her own death. Her own son, whom she believed she could help, killed her without hesitation, proving that psychopaths don't conform to theory. They don't obey, they adapt, they evolve. And then there was Dexter. He didn't just watch. For the first time in his life, he felt something unexpected: loss. He had spent years believing he was incapable of grief, that he was emotionally hollow, but Vogel's death challenged that belief. So the real question is, was this proof that Dexter had outgrown her programming? Or was this the final, undeniable evidence that she had shaped him far more than even he realized? This is where things get complicated, because if Vogel had as much influence as we think, then we have to ask, was Dexter ever truly making his own choices? Or was he simply following a carefully engineered program, one that had been embedded in his mind since childhood, shaping his every thought, every action, every kill? If that's true, then what does that say about free will? The idea that we are in control of our own lives is something we take for granted. We like to believe that our choices are ours alone, that we define our own destiny. But Dexter's story challenges that assumption. Was he ever capable of being anything other than a killer? Or was he simply acting out the role Vogel had designed for him, step by step, like a machine running on pre-installed software? And that's where this question extends far beyond Dexter Morgan. Because this isn't just about him, it's about all of us. How much of who we are is truly our own doing? Are we actually in control of our actions? Or are we just the sum of the people who raised us, the environments that shaped us, and the rules we were taught to follow? Think about your own life, the things you believe, the way you react to the world, the habits you've developed. How much of it was a conscious decision, and how much of it was the result of conditioning, passed down by parents, teachers, authority figures, people who, whether they meant to or not, programmed you just like Vogel programmed Dexter? And now, the real question. If someone like Vogel had come into your life at a young age, would you really be so different from Dexter? Would any of us? Dr. Vogel thought she was the one in control, that she was guiding Dexter, shaping him into something manageable, something refined. She believed psychopaths weren't mistakes, but misunderstood creatures of nature that simply needed structure. She thought she had cracked the code, found a way to tame the untamable, to turn raw, unpredictable darkness into something useful. But in the end, she created something even she couldn't predict. And the most terrifying part? She never saw it coming. For all her knowledge, all her research, all her carefully crafted theories, she made the one mistake she swore she never would. She assumed she was smarter than the very predators she claimed to understand. She believed she could stand among monsters and never be bitten. She forgot the most important rule. You can't control a hurricane. You can't train a wild animal and expect it to stay tame forever. And when Dexter watched her die, when he saw the one person who claimed to know him better than anyone take her last breath, he realized something. She wasn't in control. She never was. And maybe, neither was he. So tell me, who do you think was the real villain in Dexter's story? Dr. Vogel? Or the monster she helped create? Let me know in the comments. And if you've made it this far, you clearly have a dark passenger of your own, always craving the next deep dive into Dexter's mind. So why not make it official? Subscribe, join the dark side, no code required. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.